Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. If you've ever looked at a web page and wondered how it goes from just a boring, static wall of text to a totally dynamic, interactive experience, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to start our builder's journey today to see exactly how JavaScript brings the modern web to life. We'll be breaking down the absolute core mechanics of this incredibly powerful programming language, step by step. And we're using some really fantastic foundational resources to do it, like MDN WebDocs and FreeCodeCamp.
So here's our blueprint for this crash course. We'll be walking through meet JavaScript and setup, variables and data types, logic, operators and conditionals, loops and functions, arrays and objects, and finally, DOM manipulation and next steps. Let's jump right in.
All right, number 1. Let's meet JavaScript and get things set up.
Think about your daily web browsing for a second. When you click a button and a sleek menu just drops down, or an image gallery seamlessly swipes through pictures without the whole page having to reload. What is actually pulling the strings behind the scenes? See, HTML gives us the raw structure, and CSS gives us the style. But honestly, neither of those can truly react to you in real time. That is where JavaScript comes in. It's the engine. It's literally the programming language that lets you run code in response to events. So, like when a user clicks a mouse or presses a key on their keyboard, JavaScript catches that and transforms a flat, static page into a living, dynamic application. And the best part? Setting it up is actually super simple. You can start building by placing your code straight into an HTML file using a script tag, or you can just link it out to a totally separate JavaScript file. But how do you know it's actually working? Well, developers rely on a trusty tool called the browser console. If you write console.log hello world, that exact output pops up directly in your browser's developer tools. It's kind of like having a direct telephone line to talk to your code.
Moving on to part 2, variables and data types.
Okay, so think of a variable as a container. Just like a physical cardboard box in a huge warehouse, a variable gives us a unique name to safely store, find, and pull out our data later. In JavaScript, practically every piece of data you want to keep track of needs a name. So say we want to track a player's score in a game. We give it a variable name so we can just call it back up whenever we need to update it.
Now, we declare these boxes using specific keywords, and modern JavaScript basically gives us 3 main options. We use let if we know the contents of our backs might change down the road, like let score equals 0. We use const if the value is completely permanent and should never ever be changed, like const birth year equals 1990. And finally, there's var. You'll definitely still see var hanging around in older code bases. It's the older way to declare things, but let and const are the go-to standard today.
So what actually goes inside these boxes? Different data types. We use strings for snippets of text, numbers for, well, math values, and booleans for straightforward true or false logic. We also have a couple of really interesting special states. Null represents a deliberate, intentional empty space, while undefined means the box has been created, but it's totally empty because you just haven't put anything in it yet.
Next up, part 3, logic, operators, and conditionals. So, to actually do anything with our variables, we need tools, right? We call these operators. We use arithmetic operators, like a plus or minus sign, to do standard math. Then there are comparison operators. These are super handy to check how 2 values relate to each other. Like, is one score greater than another? Or are these 2 values exactly equal? And lastly, logical operators let us chain complex rules together. So you could require multiple conditions to be true using and, or say, hey, just one of these needs to be true using or. This is where our code actually gets a brain. Conditionals. They use if and else logic. Here's how it works. If a certain condition is met, let's say our count is exactly 1, we tell the computer to run a specific block of code that logs the word start. But if that first condition turns out to be false and an alternative condition happens to be true, like maybe the count is greater than 1, we can tell it to run a totally different block of code logging continue. Just like that, your program is making real-time decisions.
Let's keep rolling right into number 4, loops and functions.
Imagine you need to count to 10. Typing out 10 individual console logs? Yeah, that's incredibly repetitive. Instead, we use a loop. Whether it's a for loop or a while loop, the logic is basically the same 4 steps. First, initialization. You set a starting point. Second, you check a condition, like, hey, is our number still less than or equal to 10? Third, it executes the code block. And fourth, iteration. It steps the number up by 1, and the whole cycle repeats until that condition is no longer met. Boom, done.
Now, beyond loops, we have functions. Professor Harshal V. Patil puts it perfectly. A function is a reusable code block that will be executed by an event. Rather than rewriting the exact same logic over and over, you wrap it up in a function with specific parameters. It's basically like building your own mini reusable machine. You feed it inputs, and it spits back a calculated value whenever you trigger it. Oh, and in modern JavaScript, you're going to see a lot of arrow functions, which are really just a shorter, punchier way to write these functional machines.
All right, we are on to part 5, arrays and objects.
So we know how to store single pieces of data in variables, but what if you have a list of, say, 100 names? You definitely do not want to create 100 individual variables. That'd be a nightmare. Instead, we group massive amounts of data into more complex structures. Arrays are absolutely perfect for simple, ordered, numbered lists of items. Think of a top 10 high scoreboard. Objects, on the other hand, group related data using descriptive key-value pairs. You can think of an object kind of like a user profile card. It holds specific properties like name, John, age 30, and status active.
And finally, part 6, DOM manipulation and next steps.
This is the really fun part. We've reached the assembly phase, where our code physically changes what the user is seeing on the screen. To do this, JavaScript interacts with something called the DOM, which stands for Document Object Model. The DOM is basically the underlying tree-like architecture of your HTML document. JavaScript hooks right into this structure using built-in methods, and that is exactly how we can manipulate text, swap out images on the fly, and attach event handlers so the whole page reacts the second a button is clicked. Of course, things don't always work perfectly on the very first try, right? That's where debugging comes in. You'll lean heavily on your browser's developer console and methods like document.querySelector to make sure you're actually targeting the correct part of the HTML. If you try to grab an element and get a null or undefined error back, well, it just means your code is desperately searching for a building block that isn't actually there. You really want to watch out for a few common beginner mistakes when you start manipulating the DOM. Trying to select elements that haven't even been created in the HTML yet, that's a classic error. Another trap is carelessly using properties like inner HTML. If you aren't careful, that can instantly wipe out content you already had on the page. And finally, remember that your super cool interactive code won't ever run if you just forget to attach the event listener that actually connects the user's click to your function. Wow, we've covered a huge amount of the basics today on this builder's journey. We went from simple variables and loops all the way up to functions, arrays, and manipulating the DOM. But truly, the absolute best way to cement all of this is by actually doing it. So I'm going to leave you with a super simple coding challenge to kickstart your own JavaScript adventure. I want you to open up your browser console right now, create a variable using let or const that holds your actual name, and then use console.log to print it out to the console. Give it a shot, keep exploring, have fun with it, and happy building.